A top U.S. diplomat defends President Obama's policy for fighting ISIS militants in Syria. She says Russia's intervention has destabilized the battlefield.
And Moscow has failed, as you said and as Assistant Secretary Patterson said, to exact any humanitarian concessions from the Assad regime as the price for Russian support. The regime continues to barrel bomb its own citizens with impunity, perhaps even emboldened by Moscow's help.
Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland says if Russia wants to play a positive role, it would insist that Syrian President Bashar Assad ground the aircraft used to bomb civilians. Her comments on Capitol Hill Wednesday come as the U.S. and its partners try to work towards a ceasefire in Syria. It's good to have Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, with us. Nina, you served for 12 years on the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. That's an independent body that you served on. Can you tell us just how many Syrian Christian refugees have been admitted to the U.S.?
In 5 years of civil war, 53. Grand total of 53 Christians that we have admitted from Syria as refugees.
Why so few?
We rely, the U.S. State Department is in charge of this program. They rely on the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. They run refugee camps outside of Syria. The Christians are afraid to go to those camps, therefore, because they're persecuted in the camps. The women are raped. The men are forced to swear allegiance to the caliphate by militias that run through these camps. And so the Christians are afraid to go there to register as UN refugees.
So where do they go and how do they get lost then in this system?
Well, the Christians from Syria go to Lebanon or Jordan and they live in urban areas. They rent cheap apartments or churches or other aid groups rent for them cheap apartments in the slums of these cities.
So there are many nations that are now taking in Syrian refugees. Are they pretty much ignoring this Christian minority because they're going through strictly the UN system?
That's right. We're seeing only token amounts of Christians coming into this country, Canada, and the UK. And in Britain, the House of Lords has taken this issue up and started to fight back, started to point out that the Christians are being, because they're so persecuted, in fact, facing genocide, according to Pope Francis, they have left Syria, and that same fear and that same persecution and violence against them for their religion, for their Christian faith, is preventing them from registering.
Is there anything we can do personally and as a nation to make this more fair for these Christian refugees?
Absolutely. As a nation, we should be proactively going out and making sure they know about the UN process and get registered. That's very important. The United States takes more refugees from the UN than the whole rest of the world combined, more than half. We have a lot of leverage. Your viewers, all of us citizens, should be writing to our elected officials and demanding that there be fairness in this process. These are these non-Muslim minorities. It's not just Christians, it's also Yazidis, also Baha'is, the Zoroastrians. They are being slighted in our refugee process.
And it's also important that this presence remains in that region. Right?
It is, but they cannot remain at this point. They will either be forcibly converted to Islam or slaughtered. And we have seen that over and over again. And there are 3 Christians that were just executed by ISIS in Syria. There are 200 more being held hostage by the same group from the same town, and they are threatened with execution as well.
Terrible plight. Nina Shea with the Hudson Institute, thank you for sharing your insight.